My mother-in-law drained our savings account for a family emergency. A week later, I discovered it was for her vacation plans. I was brushing my teeth when the call came in. The shrill ring of my phone echoed through our small bathroom, and I remember feeling annoyed at first. It was nearly midnight on a Tuesday, and I had an early meeting the next morning. Who could possibly be calling at this hour? When I saw Karen's name flash across my screen, my irritation immediately shifted to concern. My mother-in-law never called this late. "Hello, Karen? Is everything okay?" I asked, my voice echoing against the bathroom tiles. The sound that came through the speaker wasn't a voice but a sob, raw and desperate. My stomach dropped. "Karen, what's wrong?" I pressed the phone tighter to my ear, straining to understand her through the tears. It's the shop," she finally managed between gasps. "There was a robbery, a man with a gun." I froze, toothbrush still in hand, toothpaste foam threatening to drip onto my shirt. Karen owned a high-end boutique downtown, a place she'd built from nothing after her divorce. It was her pride and joy, her identity in our small community where everyone knew her as the stylish, successful entrepreneur who had overcome adversity. "Oh my God, are you hurt? Was anyone hurt?" I asked, already moving toward the bedroom where my husband David was reading. No one's physically hurt," she sobbed. "But my staff, they're traumatized, and I can't make payroll now." He took everything from the safe, everything, including the cash I'd withdrawn for tomorrow's payroll. I put the phone on speaker as David sat up, alarmed. "Mom? What's happening?" he hissed, instantly alert. As Karen recounted the harrowing details, how a masked man had stormed in just before closing, how he'd forced her manager to open the safe at gunpoint, how her employees were now afraid to come back to work, I watched my husband's face transform with worry. Karen had always been a pillar of strength in his life, the woman who'd single-handedly raised him after his father abandoned them. Seeing her broken like this was unbearable for him. "How much do you need?" David asked without hesitation. "I hate to ask this," Karen said, her voice cracking. "But I need $15,000 by tomorrow morning or I can't pay my staff. The insurance claim will take weeks to process, and I can't let my employees suffer. They have families, bills." 15,000. The number hung in the air between us. That was more than a third of what we'd saved for our down payment on a house, the one we'd been eyeing for months, the one with the yard big enough for the children we hoped to have soon. David looked at me, his eyes asking the question he couldn't voice. I hesitated, but only for a second. This was family, this was an emergency. "We'll transfer it right now," I said, already reaching for my laptop. "Oh, thank you," Karen breathed, relief washing through her voice. "I promise I'll pay you back as soon as the insurance comes through." I didn't know who else to turn to. "You know I wouldn't ask if it wasn't absolutely necessary." "We know," David assured her. "That's what family is for." As I logged into our banking portal, I felt a small twinge of unease. Something in the back of my mind whispered that this wasn't right, that we should ask more questions, get more details. But I pushed the thought away. How could I doubt someone in such obvious distress? Besides, Karen wasn't just any relative. She was respected throughout the community, known for her generosity and business acumen. The boutique had been featured in local magazines, and she often gave talks to aspiring female entrepreneurs. "Do you need us to come over?" I asked as I typed in the transfer details, watching our service balance drop precipitously. No, she quickly replied. I'm a mess right now, and I need to meet with the police again in the morning. I'll call you tomorrow once things settle." After we hung up, David and I sat in silence for a long moment. The house suddenly felt emptier, as if our dreams had physically departed with the money. "It's just a setback," David finally said, squeezing my hand. "Mom will pay us back, and we'll still get our house, just a little later than planned." I nodded, trying to match his certainty, but that nagging feeling persisted as we climbed into bed. Something about the call felt rehearsed, like Karen had been performing grief rather than experiencing it. I'd known her for 5 years, and while she was always emotional, tonight felt different. She didn't give many details about the robbery. I mentioned carefully as we lay in the dark. "Wouldn't there be security footage or police reports we could help with?" "She's in shock, Emma," David replied, a defensive edge to his voice. She just had a gun pointed at her business. Cut her some slack. I didn't press further. David had always been protective of his mother, quick to defend her against any perceived criticism. And maybe he was right. Maybe I was being unnecessarily suspicious during a genuine crisis. But as I drifted into an uneasy sleep, I couldn't shake the image of Karen's tearful voice, contrasted with the speed at which she'd refused our offer to come over. In the 5 years I'd known her, she'd never turned down an opportunity for comfort or attention. Little did I know that this late-night call would be the first thread unraveling a tapestry of deception that would forever change our family dynamics. Sometimes, the people we think we know best are hiding the darkest secrets. And sometimes, the right thing to do isn't helping blindly, but questioning boldly. But that night, I silenced my doubts and chose trust. After all, what kind of person would lie about something so serious? Certainly not the woman who'd welcomed me into her family, who'd built her reputation on integrity and hard work. Certainly not my mother-in-law. I was wrong. Something wasn't sitting right. It had been 5 days since we'd transferred the money to Karen, and despite my expectations of regular updates, we'd heard surprisingly little from her. Just a brief, teary thank you text the morning after, and then virtual silence. Shouldn't we check on the investigation? I asked David over breakfast on the 6th day. Maybe the police need our statement since we're technically victims too? David spooned cereal into his mouth, shrugging. Mom said she's handling it. She's probably just busy dealing with the insurance people and getting the shop back in order. But she hasn't invited us to see the damage, or shared any details about the police investigation. Don't you find that odd? I pushed my untouched toast around my plate. Emma, David sighed, that familiar defensive tone creeping in. She's traumatized. You can't expect her to be thinking clearly right now. I nodded, not wanting to start an argument, but my doubts were multiplying. Karen had always been the type to share every detail of her life, from minor customer complaints to her latest designer purchases. This silence felt calculated rather than traumatic. Later that morning, I decided to call the boutique directly. If there had been a robbery, the shop might still be closed for the investigation, or at least there would be signs of the incident. To my surprise, a cheerful voice answered. Hello, Elegance Boutique. How can I help you? I paused, thrown off by the upbeat tone. Hi, I was just calling to check on things after what happened. Is everyone okay? There was a confused silence. I'm sorry, what do you mean? Everything's fine here. The robbery, I clarified, my heart beginning to race. I was calling about the robbery last week. Another pause. Ma'am, there hasn't been any robbery here. We've been open normal hours all week, except for Tuesday when we were closed for inventory. I thanked her quickly and hung up, my hands shaking. Tuesday, the day of the supposed robbery. The boutique had been closed, but not because of a crime. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe the staff member I spoke with was new and didn't know about the incident. Maybe Karen had kept it quiet to avoid scaring customers. But the explanations felt flimsy, especially when I remembered another detail. Karen had specifically mentioned her manager being forced to open the safe. If that manager was still working there, surely they'd know about the robbery. I decided to do some digging. With a quick search on social media, I found something that made my blood run cold. The night of the robbery, one of Karen's friends had tagged her in a photo. The image showed Karen smiling broadly at an upscale wine bar across town, glass in hand, looking completely untraumatized. The timestamp was just 30 minutes after her tearful call to us. This doesn't make any sense, I whispered to myself, zooming in on her face. There were no tears, no distress, just my mother-in-law enjoying a casual evening out after supposedly experiencing a traumatic armed robbery. I kept scrolling through her profile, finding more disturbing inconsistencies. While she hadn't posted anything herself, she had been tagged in several photos throughout the week, at a salon getting her hair done, having lunch with friends, and most confusingly, commenting on a retreat page about how excited she was for the upcoming weekend. When David came home that evening, I showed him the photos. This doesn't mean anything, he said dismissively, though I could see doubt flickering in his eyes. She's probably just trying to keep herself busy, take her mind off things. By going to wine bars and getting her hair done, David, she told us she was too traumatized to even see us. I couldn't keep the frustration from my voice. Maybe she didn't want to burden us with her problems, he countered, but his defense lacked conviction. That night, I tried a different tactic. I called Karen directly, keeping my tone casual and concerned. Hi, Karen. I was just wondering if you've heard anything from the police about the investigation. We'd like to have the details for our records, since it was our money that was stolen too. Her response was immediate and flustered. Oh, the police are still investigating. You know how these things go. They take forever. But don't worry about the money. The insurance claim is in process. Do you have a copy of the police report we could see? Or the case number? I asked innocently. I don't have that information on hand. I'll have to get back you. Her voice had lost its emotional quaver from that night, replaced by something that sounded more like annoyance. Well, maybe we could stop by the shop tomorrow. I'd love to see how you're recovering from the break-in. No! The word came out sharply. I mean, it's still too messy. The forensic team left everything in disarray, and I wouldn't want you to see it like that. I'll let you know when it's a good time. After we hung up, I sat staring at my phone, a sick feeling growing in my stomach. There had been no forensic team. The shop had been open all week. There had been no traumatized staff. They didn't even know about any robbery, and there had certainly been no gun-wielding robber. Just my mother-in-law inventing a crisis to extract money from us. But why? And for what? I considered confronting her immediately, but realized I needed more evidence. David was still reluctant to believe his mother would lie so blatantly, and I needed something concrete to convince him. The next morning, I drove past the boutique on my way to work. It looked pristine, the windows sparkling, mannequins elegantly dressed, customers coming and going. No police tape, no signs of a break-in, no hint of the violence Karen had described. That afternoon, Karen posted something that froze me in my tracks, a selfie with an expensive new handbag, captioned, "Treating myself before the big weekend. Self-care, dessert." The bag was from a designer line I recognized immediately, priced at around $3,000. The kind of impulsive purchase that was exactly Karen's style, but completely inappropriate for someone who'd just experienced a robbery and needed to borrow money for payroll. When I showed David, something finally changed in his expression. The doubt that had been simmering beneath the surface broke through. "I'll talk to her," he said quietly. "Maybe there's an explanation." But before he could make the call, I received a notification that would blow the entire situation wide open. A simple social media tag that would reveal exactly where our $15,000 was heading. The truth came in the form of a notification. My phone buzzed during a meeting at work, and I absent-mindedly checked it, expecting an email or text. Instead, I found myself staring at a Facebook notification. "Jennifer Martinez tagged you in a post." Jennifer was a business contact I'd met at a networking event last year. We weren't close, but we followed each other's professional journeys. Curious, I tapped on the notification. What loaded on my screen made my heart drop to my stomach. There, in vivid color, was a group photo from the Elevate Women's Entrepreneurship Retreat, currently happening at the Oceanside Resort and Spa, a luxury venue 3 hours away. The post was captioned, "Our Retreat Queens. Incredible first day with these powerful women entrepreneurs. Elevate women, women in business, entrepreneurs." And front and center in the photo, holding a mimosa and beaming widely, was Karen, my mother-in-law, the woman who had sobbed uncontrollably about a robbery just days earlier. The woman who was supposedly dealing with traumatized staff and police investigations. I zoomed in, unable to process what I was seeing. She wasn't just attending the retreat, she was wearing a special lanyard that marked her as one of the keynote speakers. The photo was tagged with the official retreat schedule, which showed Karen was leading a session called Building Your Brand, From Boutique to Empire. My hands were shaking as I clicked through to the retreat's official page. There it was, a professional headshot of Karen alongside her bio, listing her as a featured speaker and mentor. The retreat package cost $15,000 for VIP speakers who wanted the full experience, including accommodations, meals, and networking events. $15,000. The exact amount she had tearfully begged us for during her emergency. But what hit me hardest wasn't just the deception. It was the premeditation. This retreat wasn't a spontaneous decision. According to the website, speaker applications had closed 3 months ago, and the event had been promoted for half a year. Karen had known about this commitment for months. She had deliberately created an elaborate lie about a robbery to fund her luxury speaking engagement. I excused myself from my meeting and locked myself in a bathroom stall, trying to breathe through the rage and bitter washing over me. This wasn't just a white lie or an exaggeration. This was calculated manipulation of the worst kind. She had exploited our trust, our compassion, and our financial security for her own vanity project. When I calmed down enough to think clearly, I started taking screenshots of everything. The retreat website with her name and photo, the registration costs, the planning timeline that proved she'd known about this for months, and of course, the damning photo of her toasting with fellow entrepreneurs while we sat at home with our depleted savings account. Then I called David. "I need you to come home for lunch," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I have something to show you." An hour later, we sat at our kitchen table as I laid out the evidence. With each screenshot and explanation, David's face grew paler. "This can't be right," he whispered, but there was no conviction in his voice. The proof was irrefutable. "I checked the retreat schedule," I said quietly. "She's been planning this for months, David. The application deadline was in January. She's not just attending, she's a featured speaker, and the VIP package for speakers costs exactly $15,000. David stared at the photos, his expression morphing from disbelief to devastation to something harder, betrayal. "She lied to us," he said finally. "She made up a robbery. She talked about a man with a gun, traumatized employees. All of it was just fiction." "Yes," I confirmed. "And she's spending our house down payment to play celebrity entrepreneur at a luxury resort." I watched as David's loyalty warred with the undeniable truth before him. I'd always known that Karen had an unhealthy hold on him. Years of emotional manipulation disguised as maternal devotion had created a bond that was difficult to break, but I had never imagined she would go this far. "Maybe there's an explanation," he said weakly, but his eyes told me he didn't believe it himself. "There's more," I said, pulling out my phone. I called the local police department. There was no robbery reported at Elegance Boutique. Not last week. Not ever. And I drove by the shop yesterday. It's perfectly fine. No damage, no police tape, no investigation. David buried his face in his hands. When he looked up, his eyes were red but dry. "What do we do now?" It was a loaded question. What do you do when someone you love and trust betrays you so completely? What do you do when your future, the home you've been saving for, the life you've been planning, is casually sacrificed for someone else's vanity? "First, we need to get our money back," I said firmly. "Then we need to decide what kind of relationship we want with someone who could do this to us." David nodded slowly. "I'll call her." "No," I replied, a plan already forming in my mind. "I think we need to be more strategic. She's already proven she's comfortable lying to our faces. If we confront her directly, she'll just make up more stories." As we talked through our options, my phone buzzed with another notification. Karen had posted to her Instagram story a video of herself lounging by an infinity pool, captioned, "Self-care is essential for entrepreneurs. Can't pour from an empty cup. Entrepreneur life." Self-care routine. The rage I'd been controlling boiled over. This wasn't just deception. It was flaunting. She hadn't even had the decency to keep a low profile while spending our money. "I want to expose her," I said, surprising myself with the vehemence in my voice. "Not just to us, but to everyone. She shouldn't get away with this." David looked torn, but I could see something had fundamentally shifted in him. The blind loyalty was cracking, revealing a man who was beginning to see his mother clearly for perhaps the first time. "Let me gather more evidence first," he said finally. "If we're going to confront her, we need to be absolutely certain about everything." I agreed, but as the day wore on and more photos emerged from the retreat, Karen at a champagne brunch, Karen getting a massage, Karen networking with actual successful businesswomen, I knew we already had all the evidence we needed. That evening, we discovered something that turned my strategic planning into action. The local Chamber of Commerce had announced their annual Business Awards Gala, scheduled for the following week. And there, listed among the honorees, was Karen, nominated for Community Woman of the Year for her contributions to local business and entrepreneurship. It was too perfect to ignore. If Karen wanted to play the role of respected businesswoman, then she should be prepared to answer some very public questions about her business ethics. As David and I finalized our plan, I felt a strange mix of dread and anticipation. This confrontation would be painful, potentially explosive, and would certainly change our family dynamics forever. But underneath those emotions was something else. A sense of reclaiming our power, of refusing to be victims of manipulation and lies. Karen had spent years cultivating her image as a successful, ethical entrepreneur. She had used that reputation to convince us to hand over our savings. Now it was time for her to face the consequences of her deception. Not in private, where she could manipulate the narrative, but in public, where the truth would be impossible to escape. The countdown to the gala began. I wasn't going to confront her empty-handed. In the days following our discovery, I transformed from a betrayed daughter-in-law into something resembling a private investigator. If Karen could meticulously plan her deception, I could be just as thorough in exposing it. First, I needed to verify beyond any doubt that there had been no robbery. I contacted the local police department, carefully framing my query. Hello, I'm Emma Wilson. My mother-in-law's boutique was robbed last week, and I need a copy of the incident report for our insurance claim since we had personal property involved. The officer on the phone was confused. What's the name and address of the business? Elegance Boutique on Main Street, I replied, my heart pounding. The robbery happened last Tuesday evening. After a few minutes of keyboard clicking, the officer confirmed what I already knew. Ma'am, we have no record of any robbery at that address. Not last Tuesday. Not any day in the past year. That's strange, I said, feigning confusion. Could it have been filed under a federal address or business name? I've checked all reported armed robberies in the district for the past month. Nothing matches your description. Are you sure your mother-in-law reported it to our precinct? I thanked him and hung up, adding this official confirmation to my growing file of evidence. Next, I visited the boutique personally. If there had been a robbery involving a gunman, surely there would be evidence. Perhaps new security measures, nervous staff, or at the very least conversation about the incident. The shop was immaculate. The same high-end merchandise displayed elegantly, the same soft music playing, same friendly staff greeting customers. I browsed casually, listening to the conversations around me. Not a whisper about any robbery. I approached a sales associate I recognized, Megan, who had worked there for years. It's good to see things back to normal after what happened, I said casually, watching her face for recognition. Her perfectly shaped eyebrows drew together in confusion. I'm sorry, after what happened. The incident last week, I prompted, keeping my voice low as if sharing a secret. I understand if you don't want to talk about it. Megan looked genuinely perplexed. I'm not sure what you mean. Nothing unusual happened last week, except we were closed Tuesday for inventory and staff training. Staff training, not a robbery. Another lie, exposed. I smiled and changed the subject, but before leaving, I asked, how's Karen doing? Is she back from her trip yet? Oh, she's having a wonderful time at that retreat, Megan replied brightly. She's been planning it for months. It's such a great opportunity for her to network with other business owners. The casual confirmation stung despite my suspicions. Karen had shared her exciting plans with her employees but fed us a fabricated emergency to fund it. David, meanwhile, had been doing his own investigation. He had called the family accountant who handled both our personal finances and Karen's business accounting. I need to understand something, David had said, his voice carefully controlled. If the boutique was robbed and lost its payroll cash, wouldn't that be covered by insurance? The accountant had been surprised by the question. Of course, but I haven't heard anything about a robbery. And besides, Karen doesn't keep cash for payroll. Everything's handled through direct deposit, has been for years. Another lie dismantled. But the most damning evidence came from an unexpected source, Karen herself. In a stroke of investigative inspiration, I retrieved David's old phone from our closet. For years, Karen had insisted on family phone sharing through an app that allowed her to see David's location and, in theory, for us to see hers. David had gotten a new phone months ago and forgotten to set up the app, but Karen's location was still being tracked on the old device. When I powered it up and opened the app, there it was, a perfect timeline of Karen's movements. She had never been at the boutique during the supposed robbery. According to the GPS data, she had been at home, then at a restaurant, then at the wine bar where she was photographed. I screenshot every relevant piece of data, compiling it all into a digital folder that told the complete story of Karen's deception. The supposed timeline of the robbery versus her actual whereabouts. The police confirmation that no crime had been reported. The boutique's normal operations, the staff's ignorance of any incident. The retreat documentation showing months of planning, the exact cost of the VIP package matching our emergency loan. And finally, the most personal betrayal. I found an email from the retreat organizers to Karen, dated 2 months earlier. Dear Miss Lawson, we're delighted to confirm your speaking engagement at the Elevate Women's Entrepreneurship Retreat. As discussed, the VIP speaker package is $15,000, due by the end of this month. Please let us know your preferred payment method. Karen had known for months that this payment was coming due. Rather than save for it or decline the opportunity, she had manufactured an emergency to make us foot the bill. The night before the gala, David and I sat at our kitchen table, reviewing everything we had gathered. The evidence was overwhelming and irrefutable. Are you sure you want to do this publicly? David asked, his voice strained. Despite everything, this was still his mother we were preparing to expose. I looked at him steadily. If we confront her privately, she'll just create more lies. She'll manipulate you, play the victim, maybe even turn this around on me somehow. You know she's done it before. He nodded slowly, acknowledging the truth of my words. Karen had a lifetime of practice at evading accountability through emotional manipulation. Besides, I continued, she didn't just hurt us. She lied about a violent crime in our community. She fabricated a story about her employees being traumatized. She's accepting a community award based on a reputation that's built on lies. David reached for my hand across the table. You're right. I never thought she would do something like this. All those years growing up, she always talked about honesty and integrity. People aren't always what they present themselves to be, I said gently. And sometimes the people who talk the most about certain values are the ones who violate them most dramatically. We spent the evening rehearsing what we would say, trying to find the right balance between exposing the truth and maintaining our own dignity. This wasn't about revenge, it was about accountability and reclaiming what had been taken from us, not just financially, but emotionally. The last piece of evidence arrived that night via social media. Karen posted from the retreat's final evening, a later photo of herself in an expensive new dress, captioned, "Feeling empowered after a life-changing week, ready to bring these lessons back to my community and business. Blessed, grateful." David looked at the image for a long moment before saying quietly, "She doesn't even feel guilty." No, I agreed. She doesn't. As we prepared for bed, I received a text from a business colleague, "Looking forward to seeing you at the gala tomorrow. I hear your Emma is getting an award. You must be so proud." Proud. The word echoed in my mind as I tried to sleep. Once I had been proud to be associated with Karen. I had admired her apparent business acumen, her community standing, her confidence. I had been proud to call her family. Tomorrow, everything would change. The community would see what we had discovered, that behind the carefully curated image of success and integrity was a person willing to exploit her own family, invent a violent crime, and sacrifice others' dreams for her own vanity. I finally drifted off to sleep with one thought circling in my mind: the truth, no matter how painful, is always preferable to a comfortable lie. Tomorrow, the truth would have its day. She didn't expect me to show up. She definitely didn't expect what came next. The annual Business Excellence Gala was the highlight of our small town's social calendar, a night of recognition for local business achievements held in the grand ballroom of the historic Westbrook Hotel. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead, round tables draped in white linen filled the room, and a stage with a podium stood ready for the evening's presentations. David and I arrived early, dressed for the occasion, he in a charcoal suit, me in a sleek black dress that I'd originally purchased for a different kind of event. Tonight wasn't about celebration for us. It was about justice. "Are you nervous?" David whispered as we were shown to our table. "Terrified," I admitted. "But some things are more important than comfort." Our table was strategically placed close enough to the stage to be visible, but not in the front row where Karen might spot us immediately. We wanted the element of surprise. The room gradually filled with the town's business elite, restaurant owners, real estate developers, boutique managers, and local entrepreneurs. Several people stopped to greet us, many asking if we were excited about Karen's award. We smiled and nodded non-committally, the weight of our evidence heavy in my clutch purse. At 7:30 sharp, Karen made her entrance. She was radiant in an emerald green gown I had never seen before. Clearly, another purchase from her recent spree. Her hair was freshly styled, her makeup flawless. She moved through the room like visiting royalty, accepting congratulations and embracing acquaintances. She hadn't seen us yet. She was seated at the VIP table near the front, surrounded by the other award recipients and event organizers. The evening progressed through dinner and the initial presentations. I barely tasted the exquisitely prepared meal, my attention fixed on the moment that was approaching. David was equally tense beside me, his hand occasionally squeezing mine under the table, a silent reassurance that we were doing the right thing. Finally, the moment arrived. The MC stepped to the podium and announced, "Ladies and gentlemen, we now come to our Community Woman of the Year award, honoring a female business leader who has demonstrated excellence, integrity, and commitment to our town." David and I exchanged a glance at the word integrity. The irony was almost unbearable. This year's recipient has built her boutique into a cornerstone of our downtown business district. She mentors young entrepreneurs, participates in community initiatives, and represents the best of small business values. Please welcome to the stage Karen Lawson. The room erupted in applause as Karen made her way to the podium, beaming with pride. She embraced the presenter, accepted her Crystal Award, and took her place at the microphone. "Thank you so much for this honor," she began, her voice carrying clearly through the ballroom. "As many of you know, Elegance Boutique has been my labor of love for 15 years. Through economic challenges and personal obstacles, I've remained committed to excellence and integrity in business." I felt David tense beside me. The audacity of her words in light of what we knew was staggering. Karen continued, "I just returned from an incredible entrepreneurship retreat where I had the privilege of sharing my journey with other women business owners. It reminded me of how far I've come and how grateful I am for this community's support." No mention of how that retreat was funded. No acknowledgement of the price others had paid for her privilege. "I believe that true success in business comes from honesty, hard work, and treating others with respect," she declared, her voice swelling with emotion. "I try to live those values every day, both in my business and in my personal life." It was too much. The hypocrisy, the self-congratulation, the performance of virtue, while standing on a foundation of lies. I felt physically ill. The speech continued for several minutes, filled with platitudes about community and gratitude. As she wrapped up, the MSEM returned to the podium. "Before we move to our next award, we have time for a few questions from the audience. Does anyone have a question for our Woman of the Year?" This was the moment we had planned for. I raised my hand, and the MC pointed to me. A microphone was brought to our table. Karen's eyes widened as she finally noticed us. For a split second, I saw panic flash across her face before she composed herself into a smile. "Oh, it's my daughter-in-law." What a lovely surprise. I stood smoothing my dress with steady hands despite my racing heart. "Thank you, Karen," I said, my voice calm and clear. "I have a question about integrity in business. You mentioned the importance of honesty, and I couldn't agree more." Karen's smile became fixed, her eyes wary. "My question is simple. Can you tell us about the robbery at your boutique last week? The one where a gunman supposedly traumatized your staff and stole your payroll money." The room fell silent. Karen's smile froze, then faltered. I'm not sure what you mean," she stammered. "This isn't really the appropriate venue for—" "I'm confused," I continued, my voice still measured. "Because when I called the police department, they had no record of any robbery at Elegance Boutique. And when I visited your shop, your staff seemed unaware of any incident." Murmurs rippled through the audience. Karen's face had gone pale beneath her makeup. "Perhaps you could clarify the timeline for us," I pressed. "Was the robbery before or after your wine tasting on Tuesday night? Or maybe during the spa appointment you had Wednesday morning?" It's hard to keep track. David stood beside me now, his presence lending strength to my words. "What my wife is trying to understand," he added, his voice tight with controlled emotion, is how you could tell us you were robbed at gunpoint and needed $15,000 for emergency payroll when you were actually spending that exact amount on a luxury retreat that you'd planned months in advance. The murmurs grew louder. Karen gripped the podium, her knuckles white. "David, Emma, this is inappropriate," she hissed into the microphone. "We can discuss family matter privately." "But it isn't just a family matter," I replied clearly. "You told us there was a violent crime in our community. You said your employees were traumatized. You claimed to need emergency funds for payroll when your employees confirmed they're paid by direct deposit." The room was now completely silent, all eyes darting between Karen and us. The MC stood awkwardly to side, clearly unsure whether to intervene. Karen attempted to regain control. "There's been a misunderstanding. I never We have the recording," David interrupted, his voice breaking slightly. "Mom, we recorded your phone call when you asked for the money. We have screenshots of your retreat registration from months ago. We have the GPS data showing you were never at the boutique when you claimed the robbery happened." Karen's face transformed before our eyes, panic giving way to anger, then calculation. "I was planning to pay you back," she said, pivoting to a new defense. "The retreat was a business expense, an investment in my company's future." "Then why lie?" I asked. "Why invent an armed robbery? Why not just ask for a loan?" The question hung in the air, unanswerable without admitting her manipulation. A woman at a nearby table stood up, Janet Keller, the Chamber of Commerce president. "Karen, is this true? Did you fabricate a robbery story?" Karen's eyes darted around the room, assessing her dwindling options. The community leaders watching her were no longer admirers but judges, their expressions shifting from confusion to disappointment. "It wasn't exactly," she began, but another voice cut her off. "I'm Chief Walker with the police department," a man in uniform said, rising from a table near the back. "Falsely reporting a crime is a serious offense. If you told your family there was an armed robbery at your business, that's deeply concerning." The situation was spiraling beyond Karen's control. Her carefully constructed image was crumbling with each passing second. "I may have exaggerated certain aspects of the situation," she finally admitted, her voice small. "But I was under tremendous pressure to make this professional appearance. My business depends on maintaining a certain image." "So you sacrificed our house down payment for your image," David said, the hurt evident in his voice. "You knew exactly what that money meant to us." A hushed ripple went through the crowd. Local real estate was expensive, and most people in the room understood the significance of a down payment. Karen tried one last tactic. Tears. They welled in her eyes as she looked imploringly at her son. "David, you know I would never deliberately hurt you. I've always supported you. I raised you alone after your father left. Everything I've done has been for us, for our family business legacy." It was her classic move, the appeal to maternal sacrifice, the reminder of past hardships, the implication that any criticism was an attack on family loyalty. But something had shifted in David. I watched as he straightened his shoulders and met his mother's gaze directly. "Mom, I love you," he said firmly. "But what you did was wrong. You lied to us. You manipulated us. You stole our future to fund your vanity. That's not what family does to each other." The room was utterly still. Karen stood frozen at the podium, her award forgotten in her hand, her carefully crafted persona in tatters. The MC finally stepped forward, awkwardly clearing his throat. "Perhaps we should take a brief intermission." As people began murmuring and rising from their seats, Karen stepped down from the stage. Rather than approaching us, she moved quickly toward the exit, head high but shoulders rigid with tension. Several business owners stopped us as we prepared to leave, expressing their shock and sympathy. Janet Keller, the chamber president, assured us that the award would be rescinded pending an investigation. "The chamber values integrity above all," she said firmly. "What you did tonight was brave." Outside in the cool night air, David and I stood in silence for a long moment. "Do you think we went too far?" he finally asked. "Confronting her publicly like that?" I considered the question seriously. She's spent years building her reputation on lies. She's manipulated people, including us, without consequence. Sometimes public accountability is the only kind that works. He nodded slowly. "I just never thought." "I know," I said gently. It's hard when someone we love disappoints us so fundamentally. As we drove home, the weight of what had happened settled around us. We had exposed the truth, but at a significant cost. Family gatherings, holidays, the basic trust that holds relationships together. All of it would be forever changed. But as we pulled into our driveway, I felt an unexpected sense of peace. The truth, however painful, had been necessary. It had freed us from manipulation and opened a path to rebuilding, not just our savings account, but our understanding of what family should really mean. We never got the money back, but we gained something more important. The week after the gala was eerily quiet. No calls from Karen, no texts, no tearful appearances on our doorstep. It was as if she had vanished from our lives, leaving only the aftershocks of her deception. Should we reach out to her? David asked on the fourth day of silence. We were having breakfast, trying to maintain normalcy despite the emotional earthquake that had shaken our foundation. I considered his question carefully. I think we need to give her space to reflect on what happened. And honestly, we need that space too. He nodded, stirring his coffee absently. I keep thinking about all the times growing up when she taught me about honesty, how lies always catch up to you, how integrity matters more than appearances. He laughed bitterly. I guess do as I say, not as I do was the real lesson. The local grapevine worked efficiently. Within days, everyone in our small business community knew about Karen's fabricated robbery and misappropriation of our down payment. The gossip wasn't something we encouraged, but it was inevitable in a town where relationships and reputations were tightly interwoven. The consequences for Karen unfolded gradually. First came the email from Janet Keller at the Chamber of Commerce, officially rescinding the Woman of the Year award. Then we heard from mutual acquaintances that Karen had resigned from her positions on 2 local business committees. The boutique remained open, but foot traffic noticeably decreased. I feel bad for her employees, I said to David one evening. They didn't do anything wrong. Mom will bounce back, he replied, with a certainty born from years of watching his mother reinvent herself. She always does, but maybe this time she'll learn something. We were learning our own lessons. Without the pressure to maintain appearances for Karen's benefit, we found ourselves making different financial choices. The dream house we'd been saving for suddenly seemed less important than building a secure foundation. We opened separate savings accounts, created stricter budgets, and implemented a policy of complete transparency about our finances. 2 weeks after the gala, Karen finally reached out, not with a call, but with a letter delivered to our mailbox. David opened it with trembling hands while I sat beside him on the couch, a silent support. Dear David and Emma, he read aloud, his voice carefully neutral. I owe you both an apology that I'm not sure I know how to give. What I did was inexcusable, and I understand why you felt compelled to confront me publicly. I watched David's face as he continued reading. The letter was surprisingly candid. Karen acknowledged her deception, admitted to a pattern of manipulative behavior, and expressed what seemed like genuine remorse. She explained that she had become so caught up in projecting success that she had lost sight of what really mattered. I've been in therapy, the letter continued. My therapist is helping me understand why I've felt so compelled to maintain appearances at any cost. It stems from deeper insecurities that I've never properly addressed. David looked up from the letter. Do you think she means it? Or is this just another performance? I shrugged. Only time will tell. Real change takes more than a well-written apology. The letter ended with a promise to repay us, though Karen acknowledged it would take time. The boutique is struggling, and I've had to face some hard financial realities. But I will make this right, even if it takes years. We decided to respond with a brief note accepting her apology, but establishing clear boundaries. We weren't ready for in-person meetings or regular communication. Trust once shattered couldn't be repaired with words alone. Summer turned to fall, and our lives began to take a new shape. Without the $15,000, our house plans were delayed indefinitely. But something unexpected happened. I discovered I had an entrepreneurial streak of my own. It started with freelance marketing projects, helping small businesses with their digital strategies. I'd always had a knack for it, but working for a large corporation had limited my creativity. Now, with evenings and weekends dedicated to building my client base, I found a fulfillment I hadn't expected. You're really good at this, David observed one night as I finished a branding proposal for a local coffee shop. better than my mother ever was, honestly. The comparison surprised me. I never thought of it that way. It's true, he insisted. Mom was always about flash and appearance. You actually understand what these businesses need. By December, I had enough clients to consider leaving my corporate job. We converted our spare bedroom into a home office, and I launched officially Authentic Marketing Solutions, a name chosen very deliberately. Karen sent a small arrangement of flowers when she saw the announcement on LinkedIn. No note, just flowers. It was a gesture that required no response, which was a relief. We were still processing, still healing. The holidays approached, traditionally a time for family gatherings. David and I discussed our options and decided to host a small dinner with his aunt and uncle from his father's side. Relatives. Karen had always kept at a distance. She's isolated you from them for years. I realized as we prepared for their visit. Was that another form of control? Probably, David admitted. There's a lot I'm seeing differently now. The dinner was revelatory. His Aunt Martha shared stories about David's childhood that he had nearly forgotten, happy memories from before his parents' divorce, when family gatherings were genuine celebrations rather than performances of perfection. Your mother changed after the divorce, Martha said gently. She became so focused on proving she could succeed alone that she lost sight of what success really means. David nodded, understanding blooming in his eyes. I think that's why our confrontation hit her so hard. We didn't just expose a lie, we shattered the image she's been building for decades. In January, exactly 6 months after the fateful night she'd called us about the robbery, Karen made her first repayment, a check for $500 with a simple note. First installment. More to come. I'm sorry. It was a small amount compared to what she'd taken, but the gesture mattered. We deposited the money into our house fund, now growing slowly but steadily through our combined efforts. By spring, my business had expanded enough to hire an assistant. I deliberated carefully before selecting a recent college graduate who had briefly worked at Karen's boutique before the scandal. She's different now, Lizzie told me during a coffee break one afternoon. The boutique is smaller, she had to downsize the space, but it feels more authentic. She's not constantly posting on social media or chasing appearances. She's just running a shop. I nodded, not sure how to respond. I hadn't been inside Elegance since before the confrontation and I wasn't ready to bridge that gap. A year after the gala, we received an unexpected call. A starter home had come on the market in a neighborhood we loved, smaller than our original dream house, but well within our current budget, thanks to my business success and our disciplined saving. As we toured the property, I felt a sense of rightness that had nothing to do with square footage or granite countertops. This was a home we could afford without compromise, without depending on anyone else's honesty or goodwill. What do you think? The realtor asked as we stood in the sun-filled living room. David and I exchanged a look of quiet understanding. It's perfect, we said in unison. The day we closed on the house, another check arrived from Karen. This one for $1,000. The note simply read, "Congratulations on your new home. I'm proud of you both." It was the first time she'd expressed pride without making it about herself, without using emotional leverage to secure her position as the family matriarch. David called her that evening, a brief conversation, just a few minutes, but a step toward whatever new relationship might be possible. She asked if she could see the house someday, he told me afterward. Not now, but when we're ready. I nodded, thoughtfully. Maybe, eventually. We spent our first night in the new house discussing the future, children, career growth, travel dreams. Karen's name came up only once, when David observed, "We're building something different than what I grew up with." "What's that?" I asked. "A home where truth matters more than appearances," he replied. "Where we don't have to pretend or perform to be valued." I smiled, thinking of how far we'd come from that night when the phone rang while I was brushing my teeth. The loss of $15,000 had been painful, but it had purchased something priceless: clarity, boundaries, and a foundation of honesty upon which to build our future. As for Karen, her boutique survived. Though, on a smaller scale, she continued sending monthly payments, never large, but consistent. She stepped back from community leadership and, according to mutual friends, seemed genuinely changed by the experience. And now, any emergency call from Karen goes straight to voicemail. Not out of cruelty or revenge, but as a boundary that protects the life we've built. Trust, once broken, can be repaired, but slowly, deliberately, with actions rather than words. Sometimes the most valuable lesson costs exactly what you can't afford to lose. For us, it was worth every penny.